Good morning, afternoon, evening, whatever time of day it may be that you're watching this. In today's video, today is transfer time. So we're going to be taking this drawing that we've been developing over the past few days, and we're going to transfer it onto the final surface to start the final painting. And this is the panel that we're going to be transferring onto. This is a 2-foot by 2-foot MDF panel that has been gessoed with 3 layers of Liquiex Professional Acrylic paint, and then after that dried, I oil toned this. This is actually a raw umber oil paint tone, so I toned it I think about a week ago. So this is a dry layer of oil paint that I used for the initial tone. And if you want to know how to create a panel such as this one, on Monday of this week I actually released a video on how to create DIY oil painting panels. Here's an example of a smaller one similar to the one that I created for you all on Monday. So if you want to know how to create a panel similar to this one, I'll leave a link in the description box down below. So the way that I'm going to complete this transfer is I'm actually going to flip the tracing paper onto its back side, and I'm actually going to put some pastel on the back. So if you're curious as to what pastel I will be using, it is this pastel. And I'll be using, I think, probably closer to a yellow ochre-ish color. So now the transfer paper is flipped over to its reverse side, and I also flipped over, or I guess turned over the final panel. So this is the same panel that I'm going to be using. This is just the back side of the panel that we will be creating the painting on. I wouldn't go over these lines over top of the final painting in this stage, because some of the burnt umber pastel could accidentally rub off onto the surface. So this is how I'm going to do it. So I just have the pastel, and this is kind of yellow ochre-ish, I think. And I'm going to use a lighter value for the outlines that we're going to transfer, just because I toned the panel a little bit darker. So you don't have to perfectly go over every single line. Notice how I just kind of roughed in a little shape here, just trying to basically make sure that I cover all of the little contours, especially in the more complicated areas such as the face and the hands. So now with a regular pen, any standard old pen, just go over the lines. And I'm kind of careful not to rest my pinky on any of the pastel. So originally I thought it looked kind of like a yellow ochre, but now it's starting to kind of look like a cadmium yellow ochre looking color. I don't know. But in any case, this is just to get the outlines transferred onto the panel. So now that we've outlined everything with the pen, I want to take another moment to mention the compositional advantage that you have with the transfer drawing. So I ended up moving the head, well, the whole thing, a little bit further to the left. So I have the head pretty much at a 3/4 position, which is actually idyllic for compositional purposes, as opposed to just always putting the head in the center. And I also think that shifting it a little further to the left also gave a little bit more room for the chair. Yes, I know that this portion of the drawing is missing, but don't worry, we'll be able to draw that back without any issue. And now it's time for the moment of truth. It's going to be the grand unveiling of the transfer drawing. So this is always like receiving a birthday present to me, just seeing what it actually looks like after all this. And that's pretty clean. I'm pretty impressed. Now remember, I used the lighter color this time for the transfer just because I knew that the tone was going to be pretty dark. So now we're going to start the poster image of this painting. So what I'm going to be using, I think just for today, is my wooden palette. So this is actually the handheld wooden palette that I typically use when I'm creating my studio paintings. And so what I'm going to be using is simply just Flake white. I'm sorry, it's glaring a little bit. So I'm going to be using Flake white, raw umber, and Neo-Megilp just to thin out the paint. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and purchase some palette paper and tape it onto the panel. So just for today, since I don't have the palette paper today, and we're only going to be creating the poster image, we won't be getting into any complicated values. I'm just going to be using Flake white, Williamsburg Flake white, Winsor and Newton raw umber, and Neo-Megilp medium to thin out the paint. So the first thing I'm going to do is take a little bit of medium, and I'm going to just thin out the raw umber a little bit. Now it's not really recommended to start off with any type of oils or medium. Usually you want to build up the you basically want to use more and more medium as you move up in your number of layers. But since I'm going to be working on this one basically every single day consecutively, I really want my colors to dry. And this is actually my first time trying out Winsor and Newton brand raw umber. And I know that it's a little different. It's a little warmer, I've seen in other people's paintings. So I'm not going to take any risks with this not being dry for tomorrow. So for the poster image, you really want to go in there and restate your darks. You want to look for the light and the darks. So what I'm doing is I'm just basically going right over the outlines first. So let me go ahead and just cover these outlines. So this is just a temporary setup that I have here. Hopefully it won't damage my palette, but I clipped on my wooden palette to the panel that we're painting on just so for now you'll be able to follow along with the mixtures. And what I think I'm going to do for the future videos is have like a little piece of gray colored palette paper taped onto the side of each segment that I'm going to be developing just so you can see the mixtures. But since I don't have that right now, I'm just going to be using this setup. So what I'm going to do for the poster image is just basically look for the light and the dark. So let's just get a little bit of Flake white. And the reason I'm using Flake white right now is because it has this property that you're familiar with. I can use more of it without raising the value too much. But it has another property, which is that it's a little faster in terms of its drying time. So that's a huge benefit. So this is going to be my light color. I don't want to use straight white, although I could, but about this, maybe I'll make it a little bit darker. For the lights, I'm going to use a little bit of my Neo-Megilp medium just to make sure that this will be dry for me to continue tomorrow. So for the poster image, all I'm looking for is light and dark. And this is going to set us up for the tonal arrangement of the underpainting. So by setting up these flat areas of value, we're going to be in a really good spot for the development of the tones in the underpainting. Now I may adjust some values here and there, but for the majority of this, at least for the poster image, I'm just looking for light and dark. I'm being very cautious not to lose my initial lines. Now remember, we spent quite a while in the transfer drawing trying to get the basic shapes, basic proportions, composition. So we don't want to lose these outlines. And let's not worry about the aesthetic of this right now. I know that that might be of a concern to some folks. This isn't the most beautiful thing in the world right now. This is basically just covering the light. So I didn't do this with the last poster image. What I did before was the reverse. I went in with the dark shapes first, but this time I decided to tone the panel a little bit darker and see if I could put in the lights first while automatically having the darks already mapped out by the undertone. But I am going to fill in a tone for the darks, and maybe we'll drop in some dark accents. So let's go ahead and mix up a single tone. Something about that. A little bit more Neo-Megilp medium, just to make sure that it dries for tomorrow. That's pretty good. So some information will be lost inevitably in the transferring process, but what will remain is going to be the large shape, and that, of course, you hear me say all the time, is the most important thing. So if we lose any little details here, like the little corner of the eye or something there, it's not a big concern. Just a single shape here for the dark. I might want to keep in that little accent for the nostril, or just take it out for now. I think I'll just leave it like that for now. A little bit of the dark for the bottom of the lower lip. Let's try to make the value in the light as flat as possible. Now I am going to introduce, I think, maybe a single halftone at most. I don't know. There might be more than one halftone, but I don't want to get into too many values just yet, because that's what we're going to get into tomorrow. So a little bit more flat over there. So let's go ahead and put in a little intermediate value. And I think I'm going to use a separate brush. I'm going to use a little tiny brush. It's not the best brush, but it'll do. So for the lips, for instance, where there is a different local value, we're going to put in just a single little value here. And the accents, the dark accents, are going to be kind of important as well. So I'm going to clean out my dark brush, and I'm using a brush cleaner called Citrus Essence brush cleaner. And again, it's just pretty much a replacement of mineral spirits. They claim that it's a little safer to use in terms of the toxins and all that, but that's not why I'm using it. I'm using it because it has this property that, again, just dries, helps the paint dry a little faster. Helps the paint dry a little faster. So some little dark accents there. Go ahead and put the dark accent for the nostril back. And another thing that this is going to help, now this is going to be kind of specific to those of you that like using wooden panels, is that wooden panels can be pretty slick. So even though there's already a layer of oil paint on it, this extra layer, once it dries, will provide even more grip for the future layers that are going to go on top of it. Now I'm going to use the dark light to very carefully articulate the outside shape of the corner of the eye socket in this little area. Not to confuse this with values or with modeling. I know I'm putting in a value change, but the reason I'm putting in this dark light is to help add more specificity to the contour between the light shape and the dark shape. And the paint is pretty thin. Pretty thin. So the same kind of thing is going to happen on the side of the eye. So again, don't want to get into values too much. Just using this to help bring back the specificity to each of these shapes. And I'm going to use the tone of the panel to also play a role in some of these little intermediate values, such as the little light there for the sclera, just temporarily though. See, this actually turns inwards a little more. So again, I'm going to use the dark light just to help clarify these little edges. It's too dark. So again, halftone right here underneath the eye. Now we're going to shore up this shape. So now we have the light areas filled in for the face. Now I didn't want to do any modeling, that is, I didn't put any plane changes or anything yet. It's just flattened out with a few little dark lights over here, a little bit over there, none on the nose, and then just a little local value change on the lips. So I'm going to figure out a better solution for the palette. I do want you to be able to see the palette as I'm painting at the same time, so I'm going to go ahead and figure that out. And tomorrow we're going to continue the poster image and probably just unify the darks here. But then when we make it down to the hands, I'm going to do similar to what I did with the face and indicate some of the shapes for the dark lights.